One younger girl and a little older girl came and they noticed. Krishna noticed the younger girl was Lalita, who was his playmate. The older girl, about 12 years of age, he did not know who she is, but he was just drawn to her. She came and both of them came and looked, what happened to you? Who tied you up like this? How cruel! Who did this to you? This girl, the 12-year-old girl, was Radha. Radha, the moment she set her eyes upon Krishna, a 7-year-old boy, from then he never went out of her eyes. He lived in her eyes. From that moment, for her whole life, Krishna just lived in her eyes, whether he was there or not there, whether he was physically there or not there for her, every moment of her life, he just lived in her eyes as far as she was concerned. So much so that after this many years, we still cannot think of them as two separate people. We will go into the story later, but this is just a few years of childhood together. After 16, after Krishna was 16, he never saw Radha again in his whole life. But that 7 to 16, those 9 years that he spent with her, just made her so much a part of the whole thing. He met so many people, he did so many things in his life, he married many times, but Radha just lived. To put it in her own words, she said, I live in him, he lives in me, and that's all. It doesn't matter where he is, with whom he is only with me. He cannot be anywhere else. So just that one moment, from that moment when she saw this little boy of 7 years, you could never separate the two. 3,000 years later, you still cannot separate the two. Some very puritanical religious people try to separate the two. At certain points in history, they tried to eliminate Radha because Radha is the bad girl of Mahabharata. She doesn't come into any kind of code or social structure. She's the bad girl in the society. So they wanted to take her away and present Krishna in a more divine format. But whatever they did, they could not weed Radha out of Krishna's life. She tried to untie him from the mortar wood. Krishna said, don't do that, because I want my mother to untie it so that she can work her anger out. If you untie it, she may still remain angry. If she has to come in search of me and untie it, then it'll help her to go beyond her anger. So you don't untie it. So the girls asked, is there anything else we can do for you? So he told Lalita, the 7-year-old girl, go get me some water. He wanted her out of the way. So Radha and Krishna sat together, a 7-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. And these two beings in many ways merged into one in that single meeting. Nobody could put them apart after that. life took them in different directions, to a point where after 16 he never again saw her. But still, they became one. And the day Krishna was very proud of his flute, and his flute was absolutely mesmerizing. He was like a Pied Piper for the adults. If he played on his flute, people, cows and animals, they just gathered. But the day he went away from Radha physically, from that day he never played his flute. The day he physically separated himself from her, from that day he never again played his flute in his whole life. He gave away his flute to her. She started playing it, but he never played it again. When he was a little boy, he proudly says, "I am the best flute player in the village." At the age of 6, he says, "I am the best flute player in the village." He could melt and mesmerize any kind of person. Even animals responded to his flute. But he gave away his flute to Radha at the age of 16, and after that he never again picked up a flute. So this meeting of Radha and Krishna, this childhood meeting, when he is in that kind of a condition where he is tied up to a mortar, was the beginning of a whole new spiritual path itself. Radhapantis and Vishnupantis are all Radha worshippers, they don't worship Krishna. There's a huge, if you can call them cults. Cult is not a negative word in India, for those of you who come from outside. Cult is not a negative word here. So, they are very huge cults with large following. They worship only Radhe. If you travel in North India, you will see all Radhe Radhe stickers. No Radhe Krishna, only Radhe Radhe. Because in her love, in her sense of inclusion, she just included him as a part of herself, and they see there is no Krishna without Radhe. It's not the other way around. It is not that there is no Radhe without Krishna. There is no Krishna without love, without Radhe. The word Radhe means… Ra means ras or color or juice of life or love. De means giver. Radhe, the daughter of Vrishnabhanu, was born in the village of Barsana in a simple cowherd family. She lost her mother when she was just 6 years of age. And she was brought up by her maternal grandmother. When her mother was alive, she had made a visit to Gokula, where Krishna was brought up, because she had a vow in a temple. This temple was a Shiva temple, a Mahadeva temple, which all the gopas and gopis worshipped. This lady had taken a vow from another village, so she traveled and came, and she promised she will come again. She took a vow that she'll come again, but she died. As a part of fulfilling this vow, that is how, at the age of 12, Radhe, along with her maternal grandmother, came to Gokula, where her eyes fell upon Krishna, and from then on, he lived in her eyes. For a few days, they played, and then it was time for her to leave. Along with her brother, an uncle, and her grandmother, she got into the bullock cart. Krishna ran behind the bullock cart. Being such a lovable boy, and he was running behind the cart, they took him in the cart so that he could also ride till the outskirts of the village. So there he reminiscences are many years later. When I sat there, I was just 7 years of age, and Radha, the 12-year-old girl, was sitting next to me, and the bullock cart, when it threw us around, we willingly let ourselves be thrown around upon each other. We dashed into each other, and it was nice. And then when the outskirts of the village came, they asked the boy to get off. He got down, and this family from Barsana was to migrate to another place called Vrindavan. It is not a living habitation, it is forest on the banks of river Yamuna. The whole of Barsana village, a little village, had decided to migrate to Vrindavan. Krishna was aware of it, so he told her, "I will come to Vrindavan." And from that day, Radha just lived on, taking the simple statement of Krishna as a promise that my Krishna will come to Vrindavan. She waited for months. And after almost 13 months, because of certain problems in Gokula, especially of the wild beasts which were attacking their cattle and taking away their children. Because of this, the Gokula also decided to migrate to Vrindavan. Vrindavan was a new place, virgin forest next to the river, beautiful, abundant place. There was abundant grasslands, so they decided to migrate. The whole reasonably big-sized village, men, women, children, all the livestock that they had, the bullock carts and their things, all the little possessions that they have, they packed up everything and moved on to Vrindavan. So a group of young and enthusiastic boys leading the caravan to Vrindavan. Krishna was the leader of this group, and walking, Radha heard that Gokul is coming to Vrindavan. So she took it as he's fulfilling his promise to me. He said he will come, and he's coming. When once a person raises beyond certain limitations of his consciousness, every thought of his becomes the will of God itself. The very destiny and course of the world could be decided just by his will, simply by a thought. So whole Gokula went to Vrindavan, and there a whole new life started. So from childhood, he is moving on. From a little boy, he is becoming a little big boy.